Welcome to Buzzed and Baffled. I'm Nicole,
I'm Kyla.
and in this podcast, we're going to share interesting and amazing stories. Kyla is going to tell me a story, and I'm going to blind react.
We're also going to drink wine while we do this, hence the buzzed part of Buzzed and Baffled.
So, you're going to get my blind reaction. It's going to be completely unfiltered.
Just as God intended.
Remember, you asked for this. You subscribed.
Okay, and as a disclaimer, both Nicole and I hold professional licenses, but nothing we discuss or say in this podcast is intended to be professional advice. Please seek real professional advice if you feel you are in need.
Not from us.
Yeah, not from us. Also, the opinions that we share in this podcast are strictly our own. They're not reflective of any of our employers or any third parties, so don't sue us.
You won't get much from us, so it's really not worth it. So, welcome to episode 3 of our podcast. I keep calling it the wrong thing, so I'm going to let Kyla tell you what it's called.
We actually decided to title this May I Have This Dance, but Nicole keeps saying The Last Dance, which, while a great Michael Jordan documentary on Netflix, is not affiliated with this podcast. So.
Maybe I just have Mary Jane on the mind.
Anyways, we are coming to you from our new location called the back room of my house that I just cleaned out.
She did a really good job. She also put her husband to work, so kudos for that.
Yeah, and we are coming to you on our new equipment that it just took us an hour and a half to figure out how to work and all that. But we look very fancy. We have real microphones. We don't have little clip microphones that are Bluetoothing to Nicole's cell phone across the room. So we're really into this now.
I do think that once we get the hang of the technology, it's going to be a lot better, but I almost had a meltdown about 10 minutes ago when I couldn't figure out how to get the program to work.
Yeah. We have a new website, buzzedandbaffled.net. Nicole has been our webmaster / social media coordinator / tech person / instrument purchaser.
Queen of IT over here.
Yeah, pretty much. Nerd alert. Anyways.
It is quite beautiful. I think you should go look at it. I'm quite proud.
Yeah, check it out. We also have all the Facebook and Instagram and everything. So give that a look. And okay, let's dive into it. So this week, and we were off last week because it was Lisa's birthday.
Yay, Lisa!
So we're back, and what I'm going to tell you about this week is the Dancing Plague of 1518.
Ooh, so, I love a good plague.
So we're going way back. I know the last 4 of my 4 stories all took place in the early 1900s, but
she's got a theme.
Yeah, we're going a little over 500 years ago. I don't remember where I first heard about this. It might have been in several places, but so it's July 1518, and we are located in Strasbourg, in the Holy Roman Empire, which today is the very northeast part of France, right on the border of Germany.
I was going to say, the Holy Roman Empire is a very vast geographical area.
If you look at a map, Strasbourg, current day it's right on the border of France, and it's in France, but it's right on the border with Germany, so hence the very German sounding name. So it's a hot day in July, and I looked at the average, and it probably wasn't very much different, maybe 2 degrees cooler in 500 years ago, but it's 85 degrees, so it's hot.
Mm-hmm.
Just setting the scene. Hot, sweltering European summer's day. A woman named Frau Trophia steps into the street outside her home and begins to dance. She's just spinning and twirling.
I mean, like you do.
Yeah. Shaking, moving around, jerking. Silently. There's no music.
So she's dancing like a white person.
Yes. Without, John Mayer playing the guitar in the back room.
Mm-hmm.
And this goes on for a little while, and she can't stop. She's in a trance-like state, and people are starting to I think this was just kind of outside her house, but people are starting to look and gawk, there's just this woman dancing in the middle of the street, no music. What the hell's going on?
I mean, even in modern day, if we saw our neighbor doing that, we'd all be like, what's up?
Mm-hmm. So she's in this trance-like state, and it's almost like she's possessed. She dances until she collapses from exhaustion.
So, Does it say like how many hours she was doing this?
No, but I think it was a good part of the day, and you gotta, it was 85 degrees out, and if you go,
she's dehydrated,
yeah,
I'm sure.
Cut a rug in the middle of the street when it's 85 degrees, you're probably not gonna last for long.
And it's not like they had like reliable drinking water back then. To, like,
she wasn't getting any liquid IV or anything.
No.
There was no Pedialyte for her to keep on going. So she collapses from exhaustion. She's kind of laying down, taking a little bit of a rest, and when she's kind of perks up, she gets back up and starts dancing again, and this just goes on. Like, she is just dancing. By the third day of her constant dancing, she's not resting. Like, she's collapsing from exhaustion till her body feels like it can get back up, and as soon as it does, she starts dancing again.
So she has a compulsion.
Well, there's something going on. So by the third day, word gets around Strasbourg, and now it's like a spectacle. There's onlookers, basically, kind of like if someone was busking in the town square, you're going to have people gathered around looking. Mm-hmm. So before long, about 30 other residents who were members of the onlooking group joined and started to dance themselves. So this goes on for about a week.
And no one else is concerned about this. They're just like, okay, guys, it's fine.
So after a week, she is kind of not really the ringleader, but the first, I'm gonna say patient zero. The authorities are like, enough of this, and they put her in a wagon and cart her away to a mountaintop shrine that's like 30 miles away from Strasbourg. And in a wagon in 1518, it takes 3 days to get there.
So they're thinking if we remove her, the other people will stop because she's causing it.
Yeah, something like that. So nobody really knows what's going on, but it's kind of growing.
I mean, but in 1518, she's lucky that she wasn't just like burned as a witch or like drowned.
Yeah. Being carted away to a mountaintop shrine is probably like the best outcome for this
best
world.
Case scenario.
Yeah. So it's, becomes the news of the town, and some local doctors blamed it on having hot blood because it was summer, and you had to have all your humors in order of your blood, phlegm, whatever, bile. And
I know that's how it is for me. Like, when I get too hot, it's because my blood is boiling.
Yeah.
Like when I was trying to fix the IT problem.
Yep. So they're blaming it on hot blood. That's why these people are dancing and they can't stop.
They just need some leeches.
Yeah. And they decided that continuing to dance is the best treatment for this.
That is how it works with compulsions. You definitely want to encourage someone to continue with the compulsive behavior.
Yeah. So the doctors are like, yeah, just dance it out. You'll be fine. And it's actually, even today, a concept of homeopathy where like cures like. So you treat a symptom with something that causes similar symptoms. Like, if you have, hay fever or something, and you have a stuffy nose and watery eyes, cut some onions to make your eyes water.
Is that like if you're addicted to methamphetamines, do crack cocaine because it helps?
Yeah, something like that, yeah. Or do meth, but just only a little bit.
Yeah, just a smidge.
Yeah. Other people in the town thought the dancers were being possessed by demons. The clergy members believed the people were being cursed by Saint Vitus. Saint Vitus was a Christian martyr who lived from, best guess is, about the year 290 to about the year 303. So like 12 or 13 years old.
I got a lot of questions about. First of all, do they have like written record that this person lived from 219 to like whenever?
No. So there's nothing official about his life. Everything at this point is hearsay, oral tradition, legend.
So it's a fable.
Well, there's no proof. So I mean, a lot of people believe he lived and did exist, but beyond that, no one really knows. Like, some people said he was 7 years old when he died. Other historical documents or stories or whatever said he was like 12 or 13. So
I mean, that's practically middle age back then.
Yeah, he lived a long and happy life in the year 303.
I mean, They didn't even have written language probably back then. I don't know this to be true, so don't.
There's just like a drawing of a 12-year-old on a piece of stone that was like had X's for eyes,
and
like,
they know because he was smaller than the other.
Yeah, that's how they knew he was a teenager and
yeah.
not an adult. So his true history is based really only on legend and kind of, you know.
But what I'm also hearing is a bunch of white men in the church said, here's the obvious reason why this is happening.
Yeah. A 13-year-old died 1,200 years ago,
and he's risen from the, like, I'm assuming he's a saint, he's not in hell, so I don't know where saints come back from, but he's, like, come back to, I don't know, Polka?
Well, so he's, the reason he was a Christian martyr and elevated to sainthood is because the stories of his life say he was tortured and killed for his Christian faith. He faced a series of trials or whatever, and even though he was tortured, he never swayed from his Christian faith, so they martyred him and elevated him to a saint at some point.
This is a very detailed story for something that has no written record.
Yeah, there's a lot of okays. So Saint Vitus's feast was celebrated in Germany at some point after he died by dancing in front of his statue there. So there's a statue, I don't know if it's still there, somewhere in Germany, and whatever day his feast day was.
How do they know what he looks like?
I have no idea. That's a very good question. Maybe it's just like generic man statue, well, teenager statue.
Yeah.
Like the most generic white person you can think of.
Like I'm picturing like some guy, and somehow he mysteriously still has like the Bieber haircut.
Yeah, and a little bit of acne because he's just like 13.
Yeah.
So he's the patron saint of dancing, which is why they danced in front of his statue in Germany. He's also the patron saint of epilepsy.
Oh God, I wish I had known this when I worked in a nursing home. Don't worry, it's just the patron saint of epilepsy.
Just a teenager. Don't worry about it. The patron saint of actors, and stay with me here because this is very circular logic. He's the patron saint of those afflicted by Saint Vitus's dance.
So, like, is this like the patron saint of musical theater?
Maybe. Kind of sounds like it.
Like, is all Rodgers and Hammerstein's like putting him in the stories?
Yeah, Julie Andrews was really singing to Saint Vitus in the Sound of
like
Music,
that's what Edelweiss is really about.
Yes. So Saint Vitus's dance, which kind of makes the way this was a circle, I really had to wrap my head around it. So there's people afflicted with a real thing, like this is a real affliction, and I'll talk about it in just a second. But it's this affliction that's named after him, and he's also the patron saint of people with that disease. So it's a whole thing.
That's like using the word in the definition. You can't do that.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So we now call this Syndenham's chorea, and chorea Chorea comes
like
from
the country.
No, that's Korea.
Oh God, am I terrible at spelling? See, this is why I can't be trusted.
Korea, Greek for dancing, choreography.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. I see what you're laying down.
Yeah, and so it's a neurological disorder that involves rapid jerking movements of the face, hands, and feet.
I mean, that's what I look like when I dance.
Well, most of us do, and we are white. So, it's a real type of movement disorder, and it falls under the dyskinesias. So, I'm sure you know about people with tardive dyskinesia as a result of their antipsychotic medication, having jerking movements of their face that they can't control. But also kind of in this class is Huntington's disease.
Oh, yep.
So
won't laugh at Huntington's disease because that's not funny.
No, but we know people afflicted with Huntington's disease do have those jerky movements, those kind of spasmodic movements and twitches that they also can't control. So St. Vitus's dance is a real thing. We just call it something else now, and of course we know it's not attributed to a saint. It's a neurological disorder. So, as the dancing continues and more people join in, authorities are finally starting to get worried about the number of dancers. So they took the advice of the doctors, who told them, it's because they're hot-blooded, check and see.
But the doctors are also like, more leeches.
Yeah. They ordered the local trade guilds to repurpose their guild halls into dance halls. So you'd have like the blacksmiths and the millers and whoever that would have their trade or union halls, and they're like, no, you can't do that anymore. We need room for these people to dance.
Is this the origin of dance halls?
I don't know.
I have all kinds of questions, Kyla. I have follow-up questions.
Probably.
She's like, please don't fact check that.
yeah, don't fact check that. So they're like, clear out your dance halls. We need places for these people to be able to go and dance. And the city brought in musicians to play like pipes and drums and horns and stuff. And they also brought in other unafflicted professional dancers to dance with the people who were afflicted to try to tire them out.
But when they're not tired anymore, they're just going to keep dancing. Like, this is an endless cycle. Mm-hmm. You can't do this.
Yeah.
If I have someone with OCD, I'm not going to hand them cleaning supplies if they're afraid of germs and thinking, well, they'll just stop once everything's clean, because they won't.
Yeah. So, unfortunately for the city, and probably the dancers, the music stage, they erected a stage in the town square too, kind of where like the band was playing. So it was like, you know, a party at whatever, your local block party. And you just have people dancing all over the place. Had the opposite effect. It snowballed. Like, it did not do what they wanted it to do.
No, I know exactly what it did. Is like everyone's dancing until they pass out, and then they wake up.
Yeah. So even more people join in, because now there's like a banging tune in the background.
I'd offer you some more Mija, but you are not drinking your wine.
Well, because I'm talking.
She can't multitask,
no.
People. She can't multitask.
So the dancers keep going. Like, they're not stopping. And now they have tunes to dance to, so, like, the vibe is there.
You get more anyway.
Okay. And they're just dancing, you know, like we saw with Frau Trofea, or Trofea. I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm not a Holy Roman Empire
You're
scholar.
not a linguist?
No, not a linguist.
I got that word right.
You did. So these people are dancing until their feet swell, and they start to bleed. People have blood-soaked boots. You know, their boots were just made out of, like, leather. So.
Well, and I imagine back then there wasn't, like, socks.
No. No, and you're on, like, rough cobblestones. In probably...
Or like, dirt floors.
Yeah, so whatever you're dancing on is not a great surface, and then the footwear you're dancing in, you know, it's not... You don't have your Nikes on.
They definitely do not have the shoes that I like to buy. With like the nice arch supports and the padded orthopedic.
Yeah, these weren't Hokas that you're gonna wear playing pickleball.
First of all, you never wear Hokas playing pickleball. The sole is way too soft; it would shred on the court, Kyle.
Excuse me.
Even Lisa knows that.
So their boots are soaked with blood. Some of them wore kind of like wooden clogs. You know, it's not Amsterdam or the Netherlands or Holland, but it was a common shoe.
But that's the shoe you had when like you didn't have the money for the expensive leather shoes or the cloth shoes.
So there's blood like leaking out all over the place from these people's feet.
Can you imagine dancing for hours on end in wooden clogs?
No. I've been to enough wedding receptions where I'm like, my feet hurt because I had to have heels on for 25 minutes. I don't want to dance anymore. Well, I wouldn't dance in the first place, but...
Don't you take your shoes off as soon as you get to the reception?
Well, if you're in the bridal party, you have to, like, have decorum, at least through dinner.
Like, when I'm at a wedding, the first thing I do is take my goddamn shoes off.
Although I will say, at my very own wedding, the second our wedding was over, I took my shoes off and put my Nike flip-flops on.
Wait, you didn't even have, like, special rhinestone flip-flops?
You know the answer to that.
I wasn't here for that, people. I hadn't tricked her into being my friend yet. Yeah. But that would never have happened on my watch.
So I had my comfy sandals on. And so these people, they're bleeding, they're soaked in sweat. Remember, it's July, like, it's hot out. And this goes on so long. So we're into August now. So we're, like, in the middle of, like, we're, like, 3 weeks deep into this. By now, like, 400 people have joined.
They haven't figured out that their encouragement is not working.
Yeah. And a lot of people actually dance themselves to death.
I could see that.
Yeah. They are having heart attacks, strokes, death by exhaustion. I'm sure the heat and dehydration were probably the biggest players in that. But also, if you're dancing nonstop. You're not eating.
Mm.
You're not taking care of yourself.
Are you telling me they didn't have like a buffet table for these people? That's so rude.
No, there wasn't a green room where they could just go and get a little bite between tunes.
This is the worst party ever.
Yeah, pretty much. So eventually the town council or whatever decides, okay, this isn't working. We need to stop these people. We shouldn't have encouraged them in the first place. Mm-hmm. So they completely reversed course and said, take down the stages, get the people out of these dance halls.
Thank God, because that's what needed to happen to begin with. Like, you don't do that.
Yeah. And then they went so far as prohibiting music and dancing in the city until September. They're like, here's our official decree. No more music, no more dancing.
Had they, like, too bad they can't just, like, tie their shoelaces together so they can't.
Yeah, I don't know that they had shoelaces, but, I mean, maybe. They're leather straps. Mm-hmm. But the prohibition of dancing was a big deal. And Strasbourg at this time had about a population of 20,000. So, I mean, for 500 years ago, that's a large place.
Because I guess I'm thinking about this. Like, there has to be cultural factors coming into play that led to this type of behavior. Because you don't get this kind of, like, mass hysteria, basically, is what you're looking at, without there being some kind of cultural factor pushing it.
There is. As usual, it's like you knew what I was going to tell you.
It's almost
in like 2 paragraphs down.
It's almost like I'm psychic.
I think you probably like hacked into my Google Doc that has this, and you just read it before.
Like with my vast technological skills, I use my Mac to get into your HP.
Don't be innocent on the HP. But the prohibition of dancing was a big deal because you got to remember it's summer. What happens in summer? People get married. They're having, festival events and all that. And communal dancing, not the possessed dancing, but just like traditional communal dancing.
Feast dancing.
Yeah, exactly. Is a big part of the culture.
Mm-hmm. And it's Germany, right? So like.
Yeah, they're.
Oh, I guess it's France.
They're France, Germany. It's like it's right on the border if you look at a map. And like I said, the population is about 20,000, and you have like only 400 people who are afflicted by this dance. So there's still a lot of people who are just like trying to go about their lives.
I gotta math it. Hold on. So like, how many people like live around there?
20,000. There's like 20,000.
Okay, so and only 400 people.
Yeah, so that's what, like 0.05%.
2%.
Okay,
so 2% of the population.
I only guessed at that number. So yeah, 2% of the population.
Like, I have to know.
Was
But still, that's a pretty high percentage of the population to have the same compulsive behavior. Was there something? I almost wonder if like there was something in the food, or they were drinking something, or exposed to something that was like altering their cognitions.
Yeah, like why these 400 people?
Like there has to be something else in common other than I love to polka.
I mean, I do love to polka, but...
And I don't know why I'm fixated on polka, but, like, that's what I'm picturing is everyone... That's
the chicken dance, but yeah, I'm sure they had that in 1518. I think I heard a Gregorian chant about that when I was in school for music.
I mean, that is what The Sound of Music is based off of, Kyla.
So the counselors banned dancing and music. They're like, enough, nobody can. Well, and then they're like, well, people are, we want to have our wedding. Like, we're not afflicted in, a town of 20,000 people. You're going to have one concentrated pocket of because all the people who are doing this are together. They're not spread out through the city. They're all in one spot. So the city said they could only use stringed instruments at weddings or other celebrations. That was the only dancing and music that was allowed up until whatever cutoff date they said you could start it again.
So you may not have the answer to this, but I got a question. Like, were the people afflicted, like, based in families? And, like, was it groups of people that were closely related or close in geography? Or was it just, like... swinging a dead cat and you hit somebody and they are afflicted?
I don't know because there's varying historical accounts about other than Frau Trofia, nobody really knows the other 399 people.
Also, what happened to Frau Trofia?
Well, we'll get to that.
Okay. Like, is she just still hanging out, like, at the top of the mountain?
Yeah, she's at the top of the mountain while everyone else is cutting their rug.
Okay.
But So you can have your wedding, you can have your dance at your wedding, strings only, no drums, no tambourines.
So we're only doing like waltzes at this point.
Yeah, you cannot get that sick beat because you might get this dance.
There is no Eras tour happening here. No. It is definitely just boring old music.
Yep. So, the whoever is in charge, I don't know at this point if it's the doctors or the clergy or the counselors or if they're all kind of working together, decided, okay, Frau Truffea came back and she's healed after her visit to the mountaintop shrine.
Okay, so and by healed, we're saying she's not compulsively dancing.
No, she's able to stop dancing. She comes back. She's normal. So they're like, oh, that worked. So they start putting wagon loads of people over to this shrine.
I got a lot of questions. Was she normal or was she normal for Frau Truffea?
That is a good question. Hold that thought. Because there's a historical account of a man's opinion on Frau Truffea that we'll get to.
Well, if there's anything I really like, it's a man's opinion. Mm-hmm.
So she's cured. The city's like, oh, good. We have to start sending these people there. So they start carting up people, bringing them to this shrine in the mountaintop. It's a 3-day journey to get there. And in an attempt, so they're bringing these people there, and I don't know how they chose who to go first. I mean, there's a limited number of wagons, I'm sure, to make a 3-day trek there and back.
I'm sure
so
you
gotta stagger people.
One wagon per town rule or something. Yeah.
So in an attempt to appease Saint Vitus, the priests at the shrine gave the afflicted people small crosses and put red shoes on them.
On the crosses or on the people?
On the people.
Okay.
Although the thought of our crucified Lord wearing some
this is what I was like, wait,
Louboutins.
Is there little Jesuses with little Louboutins, red bottoms?
Yeah.
I do like a good red bottom, so.
They sprinkled holy water, they put oil on the shoes. So basically they put blessed shoes on these people because Saint Vitus, of course.
Have we considered that this was all a scheme to finally get real shoes?
Could have been. We're sick of these
moccasins. If I get Louboutins, because I have been although I would rather have wooden clogs than Louboutins, because I don't own any Louboutins. I would potentially buy some, because we all know I would if I had access to them up here.
Yeah.
But, they're notoriously uncomfortable. And also after that broken ankle, I just can't wear those heels anymore.
Well, there probably weren't Louboutins, because you gotta remember, these people's feet are, swollen and bloody. So, you're not really gonna fit into a size 7.
Also, they're peasants, so I'm assuming they're, flat-footed like David.
Yeah. Cut that. So
He'll never know. He doesn't listen to the podcast.
They're putting blessed shoes on because they want to appease the saint. And I think I said Vitus before, but it's actually pronounced Vitus.
Did you mispronounce a word?
Well, I pronounced it correctly in the beginning of the episode.
I'm gonna put that in your book.
Recent time I said it. They're burning incense. They're praying in Latin, and apparently this worked because eventually the dancing stops as these people are at the shrine. So
there's something in the town, because it only happened in this one town, so they're being exposed to something.
Word gets back to the main city, that Frau Truffea is healed, and now this first group of people is healed. So basically they're shuttling people back and forth, bringing them to the shrine. They're being cured, and then they're bringing back to the town, and everyone's fine.
Do they start dancing again?
Nope, they stopped.
Because as a general rule, you rule out medical reasons before you look at a psychiatric reason. And if everyone in a small environment is having the same symptoms, it's probably something environmental.
So by September, so we started in mid-July, so we're 6 weeks in. Eventually the dancing in the town stopped.
You didn't see it, but Kyla almost threw her microphone right off the table.
I bumped it. So it's reported that at its height, as many as 15 dancers died each day during this. The final toll kind of remains unknown because some of this is apocryphal, some of it is, it's 507 years ago.
They were worried about mass back then.
Yeah, no, there wasn't someone taking down the history. There was no press.
they didn't have Instagram or TikTok reporting this right away, and also like not a lot of people could even read or write. So
so there's not a lot of we know about this because, you know, there is some historical record, but a lot of things I'm sure were lost or just weren't documented. You know, there was no health, you know, public health program that was marking down the number of people who died from this.
It's almost like living in the current times where we don't have an active CDC.
Could be. So what caused this? One theory is that the townspeople ate bread that was made with rye.
And it was moldy. That
was infected with ergot, which is a fungus that produces alkaloids, which causes a disease called ergotism in humans. And alkaloids are a large group of naturally occurring chemicals and includes things like psychotropics, so like LSD.
So they were fucking high.
It's you know, LSD or psilocin, which is in conjunction with psilocybin in magic mushrooms.
How do I get a piece of this?
You get some moldy bread. Alkaloids also contain stimulants, caffeine, nicotine, cocaine. So there's a lot of things in this.
I was pretty close with it. If you're doing meth, do crack cocaine instead.
Some of the symptoms of ergotism include convulsions and mania, psychosis, and hallucinations. So I mean, it seems to kind of fit. It can also cause vasoconstriction, so your blood vessels in your body, in your extremities constrict, and as they lose blood flow, your skin starts to peel because it's not being nourished by your blood, and eventually you end up with what's called dry gangrene. So gangrene basically from ischemia or lack of blood flow, as opposed to wet gangrene.
Oh my god, you guys can't see my face right now, but I'm horrified by this.
I bet you didn't know there was two kinds of gangrene. There's actually more.
I did not know that, and was like, bleh,
yeah,
gross.
Of them, dry gangrene is the least gross. Because it doesn't smell like wet gangrene.
No, wet gangrene, I'm assuming, what does it smell like?
Well, it's basically your flesh has died and is rotting on your body.
So it just, hot and sweet is what I'm anticipating.
Yeah, it's not pleasant. So, I mean, not that dry gangrene is a walk in the park, but it's caused from lack of blood flow, whereas the wet is caused by, like, if you have like bed sores, an infection gets in there and kills the tissue versus.
And then you have like a deep tissue wound. And they didn't know how to pack a wound back then. And if they did, you wouldn't have clean cloth to do it anyway. So it doesn't matter.
So you'd get the gangrene. Eventually, your limbs would fall off, or you'd have to get them cut off, or you would die of sepsis.
Wow, the Middle Ages sound great.
Yeah. So the gangrenous, not all ergotism leads to gangrene, but the gangrenous form was often called St. Anthony's Fire, which was named after the monks of the Order of St. Anthony, who had a reputation for being able to successfully treat the disease. So, like, this was common enough that there was an entire sect of monks devoted to, you know, they had their abbey or whatever, and they're like, hey, bring your...
So, wait, what is it called?
St. Anthony's Fire.
Okay, so I've heard of, like, St. Elmo's Fire. I don't know what that is, other than the movie with Demi Moore.
Yeah. There's a lot of saints in this story. Try to keep them together.
Well, you know me. I'm very Catholic and very religious, so...
That's just a little bit of a... And another side note is that convulsive ergotism, so the convulsion ergotism, not the gangrenous
from the moldy bread,
may have caused the convulsions that led to accusations of witchcraft during the Salem witch trials.
I mean, I kind of feel like the Salem witch trials were about people being bigoted and awful.
Yeah, I think it was probably like, oh, this woman is having a seizure, but she's a witch, also because she's a woman.
Also, like, she has a farm and she's not married and I want her farm. So if I accuse her of being a witch, I can take it.
Yeah, so I think it was someone had a medical reaction and they're like, oh, she's a witch because she's having a seizure, and then it just spiraled from there. It was an excuse.
It's a good thing I wasn't alive in the 1500s. I would not have made it past my teenage years.
You and St. Vitus.
Me and St. Vitus would have been like this. Yeah. Because we would have gone down together.
Yeah, teen friends. Another theory about this is that the dancers belong to heretical sects. That's SECTS.
It's like, whoa, this story took a turn.
And were dancing to earn favor with God.
Wait, they were what?
Dance-
Dancing to. I thought you said like earn like URN. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense.
No, to receive blessings from God. There's a Swiss physician who actually, I think, lived in Strasbourg shortly, kind of around the time that this happened. He was an alchemist, which is not a real thing, and a theologian named Paracelsus.
It's like being a sorcerer,
yeah,
right?
pretty much. Yeah. He posited, and this is kind of his reflection. I don't think he was directly involved in any of this, but his reflection on the happenings said that Frau Trophia started dancing to embarrass her husband.
I mean, worth it.
Yeah.
We've all been there. I'm not married, so I haven't been. I embarrass Kyla's husband all the time. It's one of my favorite things to do.
Yeah, I don't dance to embarrass David. I just do other things. Like, exist.
I do wonder, though, at work, I could probably totally dance and embarrass him. Yeah. Like, around him.
And just be like, Paracelsus told me so.
This is all for St. Vitus.
Yeah. Give you red shoes on.
Yep, I buy my Louboutins just for this. Mm-hmm. They do have some flats that are very cute.
Yeah.
They're only like $800. They're a steal.
So he said, and this is a quote from his writing. So we know a lot about him. He has a lot of writings. He was super big in the scientific community, basically across almost all the disciplines of science and medicine in his time. So he said, quote, "In order to make the deception as perfect as possible and really give the impression of illness, she hopped up and sang, which was almost distasteful to her husband. And when other wives found out, they joined in to annoy their husbands too with free, lewd, and impertinent thoughts."
So they were bucking the hierarchy.
So that's what he's saying. He's saying, oh, this woman started, and then other women started because they're like, oh, let's stick it to our husbands too.
So were all of the dancers women?
No.
Okay.
No.
But also that doesn't mean anything. Like, it could be other people in society who just want to stick it to somebody.
Yeah, and also Paracelsus was a misogynist, like, known in his writings and his works. So it's not surprising that he was like, yes, the woman did it because she wanted to embarrass her husband.
Well, maybe he deserves to be embarrassed.
Yeah. Well, he probably did. Paracelsus is also credited with the reintroduction of opium to Western Europe. So stay hot, Paracelsus. You did a real good job.
So, like, chasing the dragon is his fault.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, he came up with the first formula, I think, for laudanum. And his recipe was lost over time. So it's not the same laudanum that was a little bit later, but same kind of thing. It was a tincture that was based with opium and used too.
Although I will say, medicinally, they had better options in the 1500s and, like, to the 1800s than I have now. How come I can't have laudanum and, like, Coca-Cola with cocaine in it?
Well, you also aren't, like, bleeding through the soles of your shoes, so.
I mean, not usually.
Not usually.
She stopped herself because she knows sometimes I wear pretty uncomfortable looking shoes.
Although there was that one time you walked around with that, like, open wound on the back of your heel because your fashion shoes were more important than the distance we were walking.
You make a choice sometimes. But we're going on a trip sometime later in the year, and I am not going to do this. I am just going to wear the cushiest walking shoes. I don't care if I wear a dress. I'm still wearing those cushy walking shoes because I'm 45 years old. I ain't got time for this.
No more open wounds.
I will change my shoes, though, when we go to Vanderpump.
Oh, God. Okay, good. So anyways, the most accepted theory, and this is a contemporary theory,
Sorry, guys. We took a small break to get some more wine.
You just sounded very Moira Rose, right? A small break to get some fruit wine.
I do like a good fruit wine. Do I want to be Myra Rose or do I want to be that lady from
yeah, Victoria
Tsunami?
So we moved on from our Miha Marlborough, New Zealand Sauv Blanc to something called, and I'm going to say this in my best French because I'm talking about Strasbourg, France, Gerard Bertrand Côte de Roses, which is, I assume, a play on Côte de Rhône. It's a Grenache, Syrah, and Cinsault rosé from Languedoc, Sud de France, which I know means south of France.
Because no matter what some of our listeners say, rosé all day.
Yeah, John. I purchased this from our most local Meijer, which is 110 miles away, because the bottle was pretty. And come to find out, it has a glass stopper, which is actually, I feel like a wizard or some type of, like, potion master.
Like, the bottom of the bottle looks like a rose, and it's beautiful. I've bought them a couple of times, always intending to, like, infuse something, and then I lose interest.
Yeah.
But you should definitely either infuse an olive oil and use this, or just like those liquor bottle, or the things to infuse, like the vodka or the gin. Yeah. You could do something like that.
Yeah, this one with the glass stopper, I might be a little more inclined. Unlike the fish bottle wine that I bought last time, which is a really cool fish-shaped bottle, and I was like, oh, I'm going to make something cool out of this, and it just sat on my counter for like 3 weeks until I put it in recycling.
Meanwhile, since our city doesn't recycle glass, I have to collect all the bottles and bring them to Kyla's house, and we dump them at her mother's house. Yeah, because that's who we are as people.
In the city across the canal, which has a different trash and recycling provider. So yeah. Shout out Jaildale for your recycling services.
Thank you for the hard work.
Mm-hmm.
Like, your recycling and garbage guy thinks you have a problem.
Yeah. So I just took my first sip of this. It's actually pretty good. It's a little sweeter than
It's no Boda Box.
No, nothing is a Boda Box. Sponsor us, Boda Box.
But it's a good standard every dough rosé. Maybe Daryl needs to get this.
Yeah, it's really just like mild and kind of, I don't want to say flat because that's a negative connotation.
It's even.
Yeah, even. It's not too tart. It's not too sweet. It's just kind of like.
It goes with everything.
Yeah.
It's a good everyday wine. I could have this with a steak. I could have it with fish. I could have it with chicken.
You could have it by itself, which
is what we're doing.
You could have it at 9:43 p.m. on a Saturday. Whatever you want.
Okay.
All right.
So back to the story.
Back to the story. Nicole was miming pause to me earlier, and I just kept talking because I couldn't understand her sign language. So I'm just gonna get back to where I think I was.
She's not worried about my needs, people.
You got me there. So we talked about Paracelsus and his reintroduction of opioids, etc. So the most accepted contemporary theory of what happened during this dancing plague is by a medical historian named John Waller. He essentially debunked the ergotism theory, which was the fungus.
Also, that was my favorite one of the choices.
Well, because it seems like it makes so much sense. Like, all the symptoms line up. It would make sense that, they're
When we say modern, when are we talking?
Like, recently, like, 80s, 90s.
Okay, so, like, within this century?
Yeah.
Well, I guess maybe 18... I'm 45, people. Like, the last century.
Yeah,
I was born in the 1900s.
Computer times-ish. Yeah. It might have been a little bit before then, but, like, recent. This isn't, like, his theory from 1820. This is something recent. In fact, I think he's still alive, and he's published a couple books. So this is truly contemporary.
He's an actual researcher.
Yeah. And what a sweet
science.
job. What a sweet job being a medical historian would be. You just get to, like, read shit like this, like, but get paid for it.
I would be so good at that.
And you just get to make these theories. But anyways, shout out John Waller.
Maybe we need to put his picture on the wall instead of the laser cat.
We could. Yeah. So he kind of decided that ergotism probably, while everything seemed to fit, probably wasn't the cause because of the vasoconstriction that it causes to your extremities. And he figured that someone would not be able to dance for several days in that condition because
Well, yeah, because you don't have blood flow to your muscles.
Right. And like you're going to fall, and these people were collapsing and getting back up. If you don't have any blood flow in your feet, for example, even if your body is telling, or your, whatever's going on in your brain is telling you get up and dance, you physically cannot do it.
Yeah.
And these, they were dancing through blood and exhaustion and everything else, but they're essentially
it wouldn't have had driven behavior.
Yeah, they wouldn't have had feet to dance on. Yeah. Is kind of his point. Where, even if your brain is telling you stand up, if you can't feel your feet and your feet have no blood flow and no muscle tone, like you physically cannot do it, even if your brain's telling you to.
Well, I mean, like to a certain point you can, because like people who have diabetic neuropathy can still like walk around in their feet when they can't feel it because they gotta have their toes cut off. But like, could they dance for 14 days? Probably not.
Probably not. Eventually, the physical toll of not being
your physical deficit's going to stop.
Yeah, yeah. So and as far as I know, these people were dancing. So it wasn't like if someone had ergotism and their feet turned black from gangrene over the 2 or 3 weeks that they were dancing, they were still standing up and dancing. They weren't laying down and like convulsing and dancing. It was a dance.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of how he justified his debunkment. Probably not a word, but I think it is.
Was the other guy right? They're just like, fuck you, husband, I'm gonna keep doing this.
Fucking Paracelsus. So
I mean, but if they were, kudos to you, ladies.
I honestly think that would be the best story, where it was just like a big fuck you to all the men in the town, and they're like, leave us alone.
Like, if I ever trapped a man into marrying me, and like, that is something I would do.
I'm dancing and you can't stop me. So with kind of, and when I was reading this, I'm like, oh yeah, clearly it's ergotism. This makes the most sense. Everything fits. It causes jerky motions. It causes hallucinations, psychosis. I'm like, that totally fits. But then his point is really...
So what did he propose?
What he proposed is that recent hardships in the town, the culture, the town, the general area...
See, we're getting back to where I was talking about, like, what was happening within the culture.
On top
love being right.
of life already sucking, because let's be real,
it was the 1500s.
Nobody had a good life in 1518.
Well, I mean, you're throwing your piss pot out the window if you have a piss pot.
Yeah, so. if you're lucky enough, like, there was no, joie de vivre. I'm speaking French because we're talking about France, but
She's multicultural people.
Yeah, people weren't enjoying life for the sake of enjoying it. They were surviving barely. There was no joy. There was no enjoyment.
Anyone outside the nobility was not enjoying life, and I'm willing to bet in the 1500s the nobility wasn't really enjoying it either.
Not a great time. So on top
of the smells, I couldn't.
So we have all this stuff going on. Your life already sucks because just by nature of existing in 1518. He said it primed the population for suffering, which makes sense. There was political and religious instability at that time. In fact, the Protestant Reformation was just 1 year before, when Martin Luther nailed his 85 Theses to the door of whatever church it was on.
No one expects the Spanish Inquisition.
So, these people who are raised Catholic are all of a sudden, there's wars and there's turmoil and strife just because the ideals are shifting.
Mm-hmm.
There were several years of bad harvest leading up to this. So you have people who are already hungry.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that they know is kind of being put on its end. And syphilis and smallpox had kind of joined the party around that time too.
Well, so that just means a lot of people were fucking.
Yeah. So
because if syphilis is running rampant,
I mean, basically everything is shit in Strasbourg in 1518.
So what I'm hearing though is I was right.
Well, yeah. I mean, basically because you hack into my Google Docs and read this before I get to tell it to you.
And I might be the smartest person in the world. Like, I don't know.
So he says, you basically have this group of people who are already stressed. Their life sucks. They literally have like nothing to live for. The joy has been sucked out of everything by all these external factors. And they're worried so much because remember, St. Vitus's shrine is only 30 miles away. So like St. Vitus is always on their mind.
Do I get a break and I get sent to St. Vitus's shrine?
So they're so worried about being cursed by St. Vitus that they actually bring the quote-unquote curse upon themselves.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Mm-hmm. They basically manifest St. Vitus's dance, or this Korea, not the country, the dance. This
they were having cognitive distortions.
Yeah, compulsive dancing onto themselves, and it turned into a mass psychogenic illness, mass hysteria.
I mean, I don't want to treat these people, but I'm like, I know what to do.
And, it started with one lady, and then someone else was like, oh, look at that. And then they kind of start worrying, like, oh, what if I get cursed? And they stress themselves out so much that they start having these psychosomatic symptoms. Mm-hmm. And then it kind of snowballs, and as people are watching this, they see the same thing. And the really weird thing is that this is not the only time in history that there's been a dancing mass hysteria. This has happened multiple times.
That's so bizarre.
Yeah.
We have mass hysterias that take different forms all the time.
Yeah. So, going all the way back to the 7th century into the 17th century, so, a long time period from start to kind of where it tapered off, there's a lot of documented outbreaks of what's called choreomania or dancing mania. And a lot of them occurred in Europe, kind of along that area of France, Germany.
That's very interesting.
Mm-hmm. So like, it wasn't, while it was rare, it wasn't a unicorn. It just happens that this particular occasion was the largest and most well known.
But it makes sense with what's happening in the culture at the time. Like I would be very surprised if you saw that now, because we see different kinds of hysteria now.
We do. And I actually have a note here. There's a more recent case of mass hysteria, or sometimes it's referred to as psychic contagion, occurred in Tanzania in 1963. So 1963. I mean, this is 62 years ago, when a group of schoolgirls. Thank you. Get the giggles. At school. Started with one girl. She gets the giggles, probably laughing at her teacher. Mm-hmm. Another one gets it. And this, spreads throughout the town.
Kyle and I have no idea what this is like. Like, we don't work together, which is probably a good thing, because we would just stare at each other across the room. But shout out, Beth. This is me and you in a meeting.
Several hundred cases in this town in Tanzania in 1963. So, we're in modern times. This is, we have documents. We have medical records. This is not some old papyrus that has some hieroglyphics on it.
But you're somewhere and someone does something and you it's not okay, but you can't stop laughing. Because I also think it's a little bit of an emotional release, right? Because things are getting so pent up and you're so pissed off about something, or everything's been so bad for so long, it releases the tension.
Yep. So several hundred cases reported by doctors. We have the medical records. I mean, I don't know that we have them today, but this is well documented, with the quote unquote infection lasting about a week. There's also been cases of Singaporean, I think that's how you say it, natives of Singapore, factory workers having screaming fits, kind of in the same vein, and people even in the southern U.S. who worked in a dress factory being overcome en masse by nausea and skin outbreaks, but there was no environmental cause found.
I don't know. If you're in a dress factory, I think there might be environmental factors in play.
If you're in the southern U.S. Remember how we talked about life sucking?
Yeah. I mean, Southern USA doing too hot right now, so. But that's just my political opinion, so.
Don't sue us. So researchers, people have kind of looked into this and follow documentation throughout history, and some of these more current events have noted there's a strong correlation. And of course, we know correlation does not equal causation, but sometimes there are things to be said about correlation, that you're more susceptible to mass psychogenic illness or mass hysteria, and the factors.
If you have psychological stress.
Yep. So if you have stress in your life, and we're not talking like, oh, I'm in traffic. This is like
massive
like
psychological
life-changing stress. You know, like the people
you're
in
Strasbourg. You're in a situation that's traumatic.
Mm-hmm.
And because the thing is, you can have an experience that's traumatic, but you cannot be traumatized.
Yeah.
These are situations where people are traumatized.
Yeah. So you have this mass stress, whatever's going on in your life, that's mass stress. Poor coping skills, and that's of course not across, but that's something that they noticed with these people.
But also, like in the 1500s, I'm sure they weren't teaching the same kind of coping skills. No one had box breathing in the 1500s.
There was no Foursquare breathing. There was no cognitive behavioral therapy in the 1500s.
We didn't have progressive muscle relaxation.
Yeah, we were burning people for being witches because.
And if you drown, you're not a witch. So good news.
Yeah.
So like.
Yeah, and so having strong social ties within the affected group is also one of the things they notice, which makes sense because we see these in groups of cohorts. So groups of school children, groups of people who work in the same factory, groups of people who live in the same area of the same town.
Well, and that would make sense because they're all being affected by the same societal influences.
Yep. And they all know each other on some level. And the first person in these cases of mass hysteria who gets sick, they usually have a real illness. They have a real sickness, whatever it is, but it's typically not related to the perceived trigger that everyone else is thinking it is. And as this illness spreads, it snowballs, just like in the dancing plague. So, the people affected by mass hysteria often show improvement when they're removed from the scene and examined, just like they happened with St. Vitus's. They brought the people up to the shrine, and once they were kind of taken out of that stressful mass situation, they improved. And a lot of times, once people are assured that they were not exposed to whatever was believed to be the cause of the illness, sometimes someone in an office might think they smelled a gas leak, and someone overhears it, and all of a sudden, now 2 people have nausea, and a third coworker says, "Hey, are you guys okay?" No, we smelled gas. Well, there's no gas leak, but we all have nausea and everything. And common symptoms that are noted in mass hysteria are nausea, headache, dizziness, and stomach upset, which, not shockingly, are the same things that a lot of us feel when we're stressed or anxious.
Well, that's stress and anxiety.
Yeah. Kind of your fight or flight. So you can imagine how easy it is for it to spread.
What I've pulled from this is I'm glad I wasn't alive in the 1500s.
Yeah.
At least not in this lifetime.
As a side note, I was giving blood once, and I've never had an issue giving blood, but the girl next to me passed out, and I started to freak out. So, I can see how this is easily to happen.
I passed out giving blood.
I've never had an issue, and then
but
all of a sudden,
I pass out when I stand up sometimes.
Well, yeah, so. You have your medicinal French fries, so I can see, from that experience, just how easy it is for this to happen. So that's that.
So this is interesting. We're going to go make Kyla's husband make us cookies, and we will see you in the next episode. Stay safe.
Goodbye.